Good morning. Today on Spotlight, inside the aftermath of the Governor Whitmer alleged kidnapping case verdict. What's next, legally and politically? We'll get insight from Channel 7 investigator Jim Kirshner, who spent days in Grand Rapids covering the trial. And later on our Sunday morning program, get ready for a brand new exhibition series at Detroit's Mocad Museum. It's Easter Sunday, April the 17th. I'm Chuck Stokes, and this is Spotlight. And kicking off today's Spotlight is my friend and colleague, Jim Kirshner, Channel 7 investigator and veteran ACE reporter. Jim, you spent a lot of time on the ground there in Grand Rapids. I think the only Detroit TV reporter that was consistently there at this very important trial. Let's go over the verdict real quick. Jurors, 2 were acquitted, 2 they didn't reach a verdict on in this alleged case of kidnapping for Governor Gretchen Whitmer. Were you surprised by the verdict?
No one saw this coming, no one, including the people in the courtroom, including the judge. When those verdicts were announced—
Not the defense, not the prosecution, not the—
There were gasps in the courtroom. Then family members of the 2 guys who were acquitted, tears of joy, there were group hugs. But even the judge, I was sitting in court watching everybody, the judge even looked a little bit surprised. There was clearly a plot that was discussed during the course of the trial. The government had undercover informants, they had undercover FBI agents. The defenses were that it was all just talk, that there was no end game. You know, every story has a plot and every story has an ending. Mm-hmm. I think the jurors who found not guilty for the 2 guys may have determined, and we don't know this for sure, but may have determined that there was no end game. You know, they were all arrested on October the 7th of 2020 in several locations around the state, but there was no discussion or end game that, okay, we're gonna meet on October the 15th at 8 o'clock, and then we're gonna move in and do the kidnapping. So I think that's why those 2 were acquitted, but the defenses were it was all talk, and then there was the element of entrapment. And there was actually a jury instruction that was read by the judge to the jury because there was evidence that these guys were enticed or induced to continue the plot by the people who infiltrated this on behalf of the federal government.
Do you feel as though, looking back on it, and hindsight is always 20/20, or a lot of times it's 20/20, that either the defense or the prosecution had a weak case, or did both of them have really strong points, but one side wasn't able to convince those jurors?
I thought they both had strong cases. The prosecution's case seemed to me more direct. You know, they went through the timeline of what happened. They started this case in May of 2020. There was a person who had joined the Wolverine Watchman militia group, and that's where the plot first started to be discussed in May. So he was the one, his name was Big Dan, Dan Chappelle. He was the one who notified the feds, hey, there's something going on here. He became one of their informants, and then they infiltrated with other people. So they knew real time what was going on, and the prosecution was able to lay out that case. The defense had to be more strategic. In other words, well, my client may have been there, but he didn't discuss the plot. He never said, yeah, I'm in on this plot, or yeah, I'm gonna do this to help carry out the plot. Now remember, there were 2 guys who took plea deals that testified for the government, for the prosecution. They were Caleb Franks and Ty Garbin. They were on the witness stand under oath and said, yeah, I knew there was a plot. Yeah, I participated. But the defense was able to impeach them, as it's called, during their testimony and poke holes that they weren't as strong.
Well, I was going to ask you about those 2. Looking back, and I know you don't know what they're thinking, but I would imagine they're thinking, holy smokes, I pleaded guilty. These guys got off. What does this potentially mean to their lives and legally now?
2 things. Can I have a do-over? No. You've pled guilty. I mean, they can ask for it, but the judge is going to reject it. And there was testimony during the trial. Of course, the defense brings this out. You took a plea deal. So, you know, you were facing up to life in prison for Ty Garbin. He's already been sentenced to 6 years. And it was discussed because of his testimony that could be reduced even further. Now, for the other one, Caleb Franks, he hasn't been sentenced yet, but it was brought out that he was promised not promised, but he was told you may get a reduced sentence by the judge. They can't use the word promise. You may get a reduced sentence by the judge for your testimony today. So it remains to be seen. What are they going to get from this same judge who presided over this trial, Robert Yonker, who's the chief judge in federal court in Grand Rapids? Wouldn't you love to talk to those jurors?
Yeah, we would.
Now, I think, and that could be the key here. And here's what happened with them. So when the verdicts were announced and the deadlocked on the other two guys, the judge was in a full courtroom. He looked at the jury and he looked at the attorneys and he said, ladies and gentlemen of the jury, the attorneys cannot contact you. They do not have your names, they don't have your numbers, they will not be contacting you.
But they
However,
can contact whoever
if you
they
want to
want.
contact the attorneys, you can do that. You're free to talk to whoever you want to now. You can talk to your family, you can talk to your friends. You're excused from this case. You can talk with anybody.
Do you think they're going to talk? I know you would love to talk to any of them, but do you think that they're going to talk, realizing that once you open up your mouth, you can't put it back in, whatever you say?
We would all love to know, why did they decide this case? I've talked to a lot of attorneys, especially over here on this side of the state, the Eastern District of Michigan. They think that this verdict would have been different if it had been an Eastern District Michigan jury. Western Michigan, certainly more conservative. That district goes all the way up to Traverse City.
And why was it, this may be a dumb question, why was it in Grand Rapids of all places?
Because that's where
these
the
guys
government,
are from all over.
Yeah, but that's where the government decided most of the crimes that were charged in this case were committed. So it was in that district. So, you know, what convinced these jurors to say not guilty? That's what I think, to go back to your original question, I think if the government attorneys could talk with them, that's what they would want to know. What was in the minds of these jurors?
Okay, hang on one second. I gotta get a little quick pause for the calls. We'll come right back and talk about what is the message to the government and the FBI. We'll be right back. Stay with us. What's the message to the government, to the FBI, from the jurors?
This case was based on government hate, government overreach. These guys on trial were mad at the governor for her COVID lockdowns in 2020. Does that extend to the jury? Distrust of the government. We don't think that you prove beyond a reasonable doubt that these guys were really serious about going through with this plot, as we discussed in the earlier segment. I think the message is, we've already heard statements from the governor, from the attorney general, that this makes their jobs and people in public positions more unsafe. It emboldens people to do things like this. Do you think the jury, when they were sequestered in that room, entertained that what message might you be sending politically to the rest of the world, that those thinking about public service or already in public service, that you've now made it okay for violence just because you may disagree with whatever their policy decision is? Again, we don't know what was on the minds of the jury, but I think they were aware the magnitude and the high stakes nature of this case. They knew that there was a lot of media there. They had to walk in and out of that courthouse every day. I think they could see, at one point there were 4 sketch artists in the front row sketching out, you know, the defendants and the people on the witness stand. I think the jury was fully aware the magnitude of the case. How that affected their decision, we don't know.
Yeah. But it brings, conversely, we have to go back to our Constitution, your First Amendment rights to be able to say pretty much what you want to say, except for, you know, a theater is on fire and create chaos. That was part of the defense's case, is saying, look, these were just big talkers, said some things that we as a society may not want to hear, but you went too far in enticing them, and they really weren't going to do anything.
That's what it really comes down to. That's the crux to the whole case. There was this clip from Brandon Caserta, who's from Canton Township, talking into a camera on his computer, spouting off that if this goes down, and it was real tough talk, and he drops F-bombs, and how he's going to take no prisoners, and he's telling his fellow co-conspirators, if you will, that don't get in the way. You know, this is going to happen, and I'm going to go in with guns blazing, and don't get weak in the knees at the last minute. That was played to the jury. But again, the defense said it was all talk. And when the case was over, one of the defense attorneys told us outside of court, the governor was never in jeopardy. That's their position.
All right. We haven't heard the end of this. There's more to come. You were back in Grand Rapids in the little teeny bit of time that we have left. Another case, high profile. Attorney Ben Crump, who's gotten national attention, is involved in this case. Once again, Michigan's going to be in the national spotlight.
A black man, 26-year-old Patrick Leoya, was shot in the head during a scuffle. It's all on video. The Grand Rapids police released this video on Wednesday. Everybody has seen it. It's been played across the country now. Is this going to be Michigan's George Floyd case? He was stopped by a white police officer for having an improper license plate. The officer walked up to him. He'd gotten out of the car, told him to get back into the car. He's from the Congo, so there may have been a language barrier there. The guy obviously looked confused. When the officer approached, he ran off. The officer ran him down. He tried to use his taser on him twice. There was a struggle over that. The guy was face down on the ground, still had the taser, the officer's taser in his hand. You can see the officer reach for his service gun while he's on top of the guy, face down. One shot goes off. He's shot in the back of the head and killed. And so this is under investigation by Michigan State Police. Their investigation will go to the Kent County prosecutor. It will also go to the police department. And the chief said, I'm not commenting on any of this right now until we have that report in from Michigan State Police. A lot to play out. As you said, Attorney Ben Crump is going to be in town Thursday. He was already talking on behalf of the family that there needs to be justice, that this officer needs to be fired and criminally charged. Doesn't that sound like Derek Chauvin up in Minneapolis?
It indeed does. Well, I know that you'll be covering it from start to finish. Bring us all of the information, all of the facts. We'll stay on top of this. Obviously, a lot more that has to come out in regards to this case, and in the middle of a busy political year here in Michigan too, so there may be all kind of overtones.
It's never dull around.
It's never dull. It's never dull. This is one busy state. All right, Jim Kirsten, thanks so much for coming in.
My pleasure.
Always a pleasure talking to you. And when we come back, we'll turn our attention to a Detroit cultural gem that is getting ready to start a new exhibition series. We'll be right back. Stay with us. And welcome back to Spotlight. Joining me now is Jova Lynn. She is the senior curator at the Museum of Contemporary Art in Detroit, and Dan Sala. He is a co-curator, and he also is involved in one of the exhibitions that we'll be talking about here today on Spotlight. Thank you both for joining me today on Spotlight. Everybody's okay?
Yes, thank you for having us.
It certainly is our pleasure. Jova, I'm going to begin with you. The nickname, I guess you would call it, would be Mocad.
Yep.
And everybody knows it. It's on Woodward Avenue. And it's a big black building. I've passed it a zillion times, but I think a lot of people pass it because Woodward is such a busy street, and they aren't real sure what's inside that building if they haven't been there before. Give us a quick capsule of what is Mocad and its significance to Detroit.
Yeah, so Mocad is the Contemporary Art Museum of Detroit. We're a little different than the DIA in that we don't collect art. We just show living artists, usually artists who've been around for at least the past 50 years doing the work. We do tend to highlight local artists while also having an international lean. And so Mocad is actually in a former auto showroom. So that's sort of the mystery on Woodward. So we're actually in a historic building, which is pretty exciting for us to have art be in this room that is has such a significant history for Detroit.
Sure. And before we jump into the art, because that's our main purpose here, but when I went to the website, I was struck by the fact that in a very prominent way, you talk about the indigenous land that you're on.
Yeah, so we are on the land of Wawa-Atinang, and Mocad is really committed to supporting the work of the Wawa-Atinang Arts Council, which you can check them out if you go to landback313.com. They do amazing work, a network of Michiganders who are really focusing on issues related to Indigenous sovereignty.
Dan, you are co-curator and you're involved in a particular exhibition coming up. I think it's kind of the lead exhibition on all this, called The Ground Up. Tell us a little bit about that.
We are, I work with Mocad, work with my co-curator Jessica Alley and Jova Lynn here to put together a show showcasing the collection of James Dozier. He's a local resident of this city. He has been a patron of the arts in the city of Detroit since the 70s and has been collecting art actively ever since. The theme that we drove at while looking through all his collection is that he has been supporting Black artists from the very beginnings of their careers, mid-career, late career, really all over the place. And we look at James as a kind of a foundation or a support for like a lot of artists around here. And so we have brilliant works from artists who are living and past. We have Charles McGee, we have Gilda Snowden, we have Allie McGee, Chris Turner, Jack Johnson. The list really goes on and on. There's
and those are some well-known artists in this area and across the country, without a doubt.
Absolutely.
Yeah. All right, I'm gonna rush in a little break here. When we come back, I'll pick back up with you and Jova and talk about this series of exhibitions coming. We'll be right back. Stay with us. And welcome back to Spotlight. Jova, you have an exhibition series coming up. Tell us about that and what are people going to see?
Yeah, so this season is really rooted in Black contemporary creativity, from Dozier's exhibition that that Dan talked about, to Dreamhampton's Freshwater, to Sterling Toll's Shelves. And I'm actually in our main gallery, that's our Woodward Gallery, and behind me is the work of a Toronto-based artist named Nepsidue, who's deeply, deeply influenced by musical legacies of the city. Dreamhampton revealed a this is her most personal film that will be at Mocad, which is about her family's history in the Black Bottom and flooding basements, and sort of how the phenomena or the reality of flood still affects Detroit. Sterling's exhibition, which is in Mike Kelly Mobile Homestead, he has been an artist in residence at Mocad since February, being here every day, talking to community members, getting information about how one relates to identities. And he's created a magnificent video installation and series of portraits of Detroiters. Nepsidue, his work, it combines robust colors, as you can see behind me, but also massive sculptures. One of the pieces that are going to be debuting at Mocad on Friday, April 22nd, is a series of speakers that he made. He worked with the late Mike Huckabee, local DJ here, producer, phenomenal legend who passed away last year. So he worked with Mike's brother, Craig, to sort of dig through Mike's archives to find these reel-to-reels that he created with actually Sun Ra's pieces. And so these speakers that are going to be located in this gallery are going to be on 24 hours a day, 7 days a week, playing Mike Huckabee's work.
And we should say that these exhibitions will be sort of staggered.
Yes.
They're really kind of kicking off now, and they will be there all the way up through September, depending on the particular exhibition. I think I saw,
Correct.
And maybe even a little beyond that. Dan, as someone who's involved in curating, what's the biggest challenge when you put these things on, whether not just this exhibition, but any exhibition? What goes into it?
Oh, you gotta do a lot of organizing. With a show like this, you're working with one collector, but there's a lot of artists tied to this. We have to research, we have to look up additional information on everybody, and kind of have communication with all the artists featured in your works and your shows. It takes a village to really put something really exceptional together, and I had amazing help with Mocad and be able to put this together. And this is the easiest that it ever could be. They have a fantastic staff between Jova, co-curator Jessica, Zeb Smith. We had an amazing team putting this together. I'm really proud of the work we did.
And do the artists have to be a little trusting in giving you their works, not in terms of safety, but in terms of what may be the best way to present? Because artists are artists and they're really into whatever it is that they've created, but that may not be the same skill set that's needed once it gets in a gallery when you're trying to figure out what's best for the presentation for people coming in as pedestrians off the street.
I mean, that's absolutely true. I think that, artists create, and, I think that a lot of artists do have a sense of how they want to have it presented, but I think that it's a working relationship between the space and the artist to try to figure out what kind of materials, what kind of resources we have to present it in a way that works for everybody. I think, and again, really great work with Zeb here, putting things together, presenting things in a way that make the most sense. I think this is our show. Ground Up looks amazing. All the shows are going to look great, but I'm really proud that we were able to take these things out of storage and put them back up again.
Sure.
Really happy to see it up.
In a nice and loving way. Thanks for all of this. Check your egos at the door and let us take it from here. And you don't have, that's rhetorical. You don't have to comment. I don't want to get you in trouble. Jova, you have a big reception coming up this coming Friday.
We
on
do.
The 22nd. And tell us a little bit in the brief time we have left about that, and is it open to the public?
Yes, so Mocad is always a free to sliding to suggested donation admission. So we welcome everybody from Detroit, visitors, folks in all our surrounding counties to come down and hang out with us Friday, April 22nd. Sterling Tolles is going to be giving a tour of his exhibition starting at 6:15. And those speakers that I talked about here in Netsadu's exhibition are going to be activated at 7 p.m.
All right, and we'll put your website
Yes.
up on the screen, as well as link it to
We'll all be there.
WXYZ.com. That way people can get more information. Jova Lynn and Dan Sala, thanks so much for joining us today from Spotlight, on Spotlight, not from Spotlight, and give our best to Elise Fulton, who I think is your chair there, and called me way back when and said, you ought to do something on Mocad. So we finally done it. So hopefully
Absolutely.
All right. I'm Chuck Stokes. We'll be back next week with more newsmakers in the Spotlight. We hope you have a great week.